Thanks for tuning in to the Boiled Sports Podcast Network.
Good evening, good morning to you whenever you're watching this. This is not live. This is recorded. My name is BDowd. I'm hosting a kind of an unusual midweek just thing. I don't even know what you'd call it, QuickCast. But it's a different than the normal QuickCast because I actually have a guest today. I got to talk to my pal Schultz about just a couple things. He was at the Purdue game when they beat Arizona this last weekend. But I wanted to talk to him a little bit about what he thought about Purdue right now, what he thought about the view of college sports world from a Purdue chair, since he's a Purdue staffer now, and he's a IU alum and a former. Well, he's still an IU fan. I spilled water all over myself, but he's an all-around good guy too, and I just thought it'd be fun to talk to him. So in a second, you'll get to hear from Schultz. Before I do that, I want to thank the maker of my sweatshirt, Home Field Apparel. Head over there, homefieldapparel.com. Enter Boiled23 at checkout. Get 15% off. When you're on campus, head over to AJ's on Vine. EatAJ's.com before. Burgers, beef, beer. That's AJ's. So Purdue is number one once again. I thought they might be number one in my post-game wrap-up after the Arizona game. Turns out they got the number one nod. I joked that I didn't want it off of the air, away from things, because it's not the best place to be for Purdue. You know, if you don't know this, I talk about this in my conversation. Purdue set a record, being the only team ever to be number one for 4 weeks and then lose that week. Purdue was number one, I think, for 8 weeks last season. I don't think this season will go like that one for multiple reasons. I mean, hell, it could. The aftermath of the Arizona game leaves you in a different position. Purdue has now beaten one of the teams that, if you say there's the eyeball test in college basketball, they passed that. I said this after the game. They're just not a metric that you can't find that Arizona isn't one of the best teams in America, if not the very best. When you look at the polls, there are 6 teams that look to be the 6 best teams in America. All of them, I think. I was surprised that more of them didn't get a number one vote this week, just because of the inherent biases that are built in with the media and the things that media doesn't get to see because they're maybe focusing on another region or whatever. But surprisingly, Purdue got 48 of the, 60-something votes, the number one votes. And so that's a pretty dominant performance. I think they had all but one the last time they were voted number one this season. So their second ride at number one. Hopefully they can stay there a little bit longer. Yeah, so I watched the Matt Painter show recorded last night. And one thing that I took away, maybe the biggest thing I took away with Coach Terry Johnson talking about was a quote that he said that's accurate. He said, hey, basketball's supposed to be fun, should be fun for the fans. These coaches, the players, hear what the chatter is on social media. And it's amazing to me, it's incredible to me that even during a win after a number one team, that some people can find that there's not joy to be found in that. If you devalue the regular season that much just because of postseason failure, and I'm not diminishing the importance of the postseason failure. I hope you find something that brings joy to you, because that's pretty awesome. It's the first time Purdue's beaten a number one team since they beat Arizona back in, I think it was 2001, something like that. They beat them in Indianapolis too. So pretty interesting way for history to kind of wrap itself up in a nice little bow. There was one other factoid that I wanted to share that maybe you've heard and maybe you saw. The big three of Purdue, like I talked about in the headline and the post game, of course, Zach Edey, Braden Smith, Fletch Lawyer, they all had 26 points, over 26 points, I think. Can't remember. It's the first time in the history of Purdue's basketball program that 3 players have each had 22 or more points. It's pretty amazing. Purdue's got a long history in college basketball. Derek and I talk a little bit about this in our conversation, how Purdue's system maybe isn't always, it's not, the teams usually aren't built this way where you have guys that are going to light you on fire, let alone 3 do it at one time. So I encourage all of us to enjoy the ride a little bit. In the meantime, enjoy this conversation with Schultz. Derek, how you been?
I'm good, man. It's great to talk with you.
Yeah, it's good to talk to you again. Derek and I have known each other for a couple years, and I'm always a fan of people that go through a rebirth and are willing to admit they were wrong, and like you have with your
Yeah. Sure. You can certainly paint it that way if you want to do it. I'm loyal to whoever signs my checks. You know what I mean? That's what I'm
yeah. I get that.
No,
That's
but
why I'm a Purdue fan. Similarly, because it's made me rich, filthy, stinking
yeah,
rich.
there we go.
Yeah.
In all seriousness, it's for those that I guess don't know, I might be one of the few IU graduates that you've ever had on this show. Former IU, I mean, I'll just be truthful, super fan. But I always appreciated, or I shouldn't say always, because I definitely didn't always appreciate it. I came to appreciate the affinity that my Purdue fan friends, who are near and dear to my heart, had for their university. And then when it came to the point where I became an employee, this background is not something that I made for the show. This is actually something that I use on my work calls. I leaned in, man. That's how anything that I've ever done in my life. I don't kind of halfway do it. I go all the way in, and that's what I've done with this. And I'm really enjoying that. And even though it's not athletics related, it's just with the university, obviously the branding of the university is something that's very important to me professionally. So what better to brand the university than having the number one basketball team and having them be successful, right? So that's
Easy
kind of where we
peasy.
are with it. Yeah.
Yeah. So years ago, before you were officially affiliated with Purdue University, I always appreciated you just because I listened to the radio show first, and I always thought you were very fair-minded. You can be a fan. I think it's great that you shouldn't abandon. I completely am kidding when I say abandoning these mistakes. There are 5 or 6 IU fans that are very palatable people, and you're one of them, and a couple of my other friends, and that's it. But no, I always thought you were fair-minded when you were on the radio show, and you provided good balance. Because back then, I felt Query was just like, I would listen to the show on the radio and just yell at it and be like, "What the hell are you doing, Jake?" And you were kind of providing, I think, some even-handedness, even if you didn't always feel it. And I think that's a sign of a true pro. I obviously can't do any of that. I will be really honest.
Yeah,
So,
it was one of those things where we look, people, Purdue fans know this as well. You have to jockey for attention, right? It feels like. And so it's such a great fan base, and it has obviously major athletic programs that are in the discussion. They need a seat at the table. And that's just, and I have felt the same way about Butler. I felt the same way about the Pacers. The Pacers got overshadowed here in this town because it's Colts, IU basketball, IU basketball, IU basketball. And you want to be a well-rounded show. And then we had the relationship at the old Fox Sports and WNDE with we were the co-flag with the station in Lafayette for Purdue men's basketball and football. So we had that relationship too, where we went out and did the practices. And one of the coolest things I got to do with the show was do a closed practice every year with Matt Painter. And literally it was him, Elliot Bloom, Chris Foreman, the staff, and us. And that was it. There was no one else that was in there. So then you get really, I mean, you talk about a backstage pass to a practice, and you hear things that are said in that practice, and it's not like it's when the cameras are on. So that was part of kind of my growing affinity and respect for Purdue as well. I mean, yeah, I wanted to have integrity when I was talking about them, and not like lean into me being 20-year-old IU fan from back in the day. So that was important to me, and I appreciate that you felt that way listening to it as a Purdue fan.
yeah, I mean, I think one thing you're touching on right there, though, is because you've interacted with Painter a little bit, you get to see this personality of a guy that we have this joke behind closed doors that it'd be so much easier to just jump off the bandwagon after kind of some of the March failures and be angry and stay angry at Painter if he wasn't such a damn good interview. And just like, I know my bias shows through here, but I really, really like to hear Painter speak, and I really like to hear him answer the questions. Most of the time, he kind of slipped a little bit. He got a little bit away from the self-deprecation and the he's been pretty self-critical, I think, in the months leading up to the season. A week or two ago, he lashed out a bit at some of the things that people were saying. And I think he's kept that in. I know he's been pissed off too. But is there anything like that we don't get to see that I know I'm sure you can't say everything you've seen or heard, but is there anything you've seen in practice or in, like just off of the camera that we don't get to see that surprised you about Matt Painter? I know I love he loves baseball, but is there anything else that you've seen that you really enjoy about him?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that I was necessarily surprised by anything that we saw behind the scenes. He coaches the guys hard, and he recruits guys that want to be coached like that. So it's not like there's not tension. You know what I mean? Guys know what they've signed up for, and I think that's a real testament to Painter that he's really mastered finding fits for Purdue and for their culture and for what they want to accomplish. I'll tell you something that I appreciate about him is that he really is just a regular guy that happens to be a great basketball coach. He's really just a dude. And when he really lights up is not when he's talking about offensive schemes to get more shots for Fletcher Lawyer. He opens up when you ask him about the Cubs run to the 1998 NL wild card. Like,
Right.
That's when he really lights up. And I've always kind of appreciated that about him. I mean, people take this stuff, and it's funny that we're saying this on, we're doing you're doing a show that's strictly just about Purdue sports, but people take sports so seriously. Even the people inside sports take sports so seriously, and it's nice to kind of have sometimes moments of just levity where it's like, yeah, it's sports and it matters and it's important, but it's not my life. It's not my entire identity. And I think Matt Painter lives that pretty well.
What's the main platform for your show now with Jake?
Is
it YouTube?
ISC Sports Network is what we've been doing kind of this second generation of the show on since 2020.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, it's different to me. It's not as easily accessible. I mean, I'm a guy that I like to have YouTube in the background during my workday when I can. And so I catch up with you guys there. It's not as easy, like just jumping in my car and catching snippets. I probably watch more time-wise than I even used to listen, but it felt like it was easier just to have you in the car during drives when I was picking up my kids or whatever. I like the format. So
and having 4 hours, so 20 hours a week compared to 1 hour a week, it's very difficult to fit in everything that we want.
It's super high octane. That's the funny thing. Yeah. Like, when you guys show that there's like in the title what the topics are going to be, sometimes I'm like, when are they going to get to that? Yeah. I mean, I love the talks of sandwiches. Don't get me wrong, but
well, we do have sponsors that we have to
gotta make them happy. Yeah. Not me. I don't have any of that.
No, of course not.
So one of the things I liked about this last show, and I knew the answer right when Jake asked it, but I wanted to bring it back up with you. There are like a couple things I wanted to touch on that you guys just talked about. And one of them was that the thing that Purdue had done that I think he said no other team had ever done, lost 4 times as number 1 last year. That was a shocking thing to me. And I don't know, like, I think Purdue was number 1. I think we counted 8 weeks last year. Was IU number 1?
My freshman year at IU was the Tom Coverdale, Jared Jeffries, AJ Moye team that went all the way to the title game. So that was was my freshman year. Okay,
that's a super likable team. Were they? But I know that was a great run in the tournament.
They were never number 1.
They were never number 1. Yeah, because they hit their stride in March, right?
They started the year 7-5. And then they ended up sharing the Big Ten, I think, 4 ways that year, and they were a 5 seed, and they made their run to the championship game as a 5.
That's the thing. It's so hard as a Purdue fan. I mean, like, I grew up a Purdue fan, like literally trying to fight my way out against IU/Notre Dame football fans in grade school.
Yeah,
and so like, as almost as long as I can remember, IU was just accepted as they go to Final Fours, they win national championships, obviously with Knight. And IU goes that one, in the early 2000s. It's like, holy crap, they just did it again. And we, as Purdue fans, I just want to see a Final Four. I keep saying it. National title. I mean, It's almost like the Red Sox getting best of Yankees to me. I had a lot of friends that were Red Sox fans because my college roommate was from Maine, and I had all these connections to living in the Boston area. And so when the Red Sox got by the Yankees, it was almost like, okay, they're going to win the World Series. That's what it felt
like a fait accompli, right? Yeah.
Right. And I don't know if I'll feel that way.
I felt that.
Okay, yeah, there you go. Yeah. I mean, and Jay's a Yankee fan too. And it's funny, he and I used to kind of go back and forth a little bit. At that point, I watched baseball a lot more regularly. It was still fresh of living in the Northeast. I don't know if I'll feel that way if I don't think, I'm not counting anything a done deal. But I had a friend ask me who's not a huge college basketball fan, because I was kind of catching him up. He lives internationally right now. I'm like, how are you keeping up on college basketball? Because I know he does watch. He's like, oh, not as much as I'd like. It's all via Instagram. It's all snippets. And he said, is Purdue as good as it looks like they are? And I said, yeah. And he said, should they go to the Final Four? I said, yeah. And he said, will they? I said, I don't think so. So, I mean, like, and I'm not trying to be, I just can't get my head around that world.
No, until you do it, right? Until you do it. Yeah. Look, I'm a Connecticut native. My brother-in-law's UConn. A lot of my high school friends, UConn. And you see them with, they had a 7 seed win the whole thing. They had a team that went 9-9 in the Big East win the whole thing.
Man.
They had a 5 seed this last year win the whole thing. And it's kind of like, guys, I don't know if you realize this, but you've had like 3 runs that you've had like 4 lifetimes worth of championships in 10 years, basically. What they've done 2011 to now, it's just insane. And you look at that with supreme jealousy, because you say, not just Purdue fans, but anybody, like, why the hell look at Arizona. Arizona hasn't been to the Final Four in over 20 years. Arizona.
And they've been one of the best programs multiple times. They've been top 5, and then they've bowed out in the first or second round.
So, it's not just look, we all know that Purdue has become kind of the national poster child of that, but it's tough. It's a single elimination random tournament, and you need to be good, no doubt. And I'm not discrediting any of those teams outside of the Napier team, because that was a complete fluke in 2014. What a joke. They're like the worst champion ever. I can't stand that group.
But we've talked about this at Boiled Sports. Jay and Anish and I have talked about multiple times. We always talk about dynamic guard play. Guys that can then put, that can bring the ball up and then say, I'm going to keep it in my hands, right? That sort of thing. So there's no leaving no doubt. And this is one of the problems, is Purdue has been a big man centric program for as long as I can remember, my whole life, right? I go back to Rowinski and Russell Cross and, like way back for a lot of people, Scheffler. And so that's kind of the nature of the beast. And so when Purdue starts getting these dynamic guards, you start saying, well, maybe this is the thing to crack the code. Connecticut is built on the dynamic guard. Even IU's runs, right? You'd say, I always think about Keith Smart making shots, but really I'd say that was Alford more than Smart,
Yeah.
So, but dynamic guard play, I think, is still
81, and you go back to a couple of those IU teams, they were led by that for sure.
Did you see that? Go ahead.
I was going to say, if you wonder if I don't know if this was your segue or not, but if you wonder if Braden Smith is going to play at this level, how that changes the dynamic for this Purdue team. I mean, forget Lawyer. Look, if Smith and Lawyer play like they do, Arizona is really good. Like, they're one of the best defensive teams in the country. They're one of the most athletic teams in the country. And Lawyer and Smith, the first 25 minutes of that game just completely took over. They dominated them. And that's a backcourt with Caleb Love in it. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
If they play to that level, and I know, again, it's hard to wrap your head around Purdue getting to the Final Four, but if they play at that level, they're not getting beat. I don't think.
Right. I don't think, like, for my whole thing with Lawyer specifically, I just keep saying I need Lawyer to knock down open shots. That's it. Like, him being a creator, that really blew me away. I'll be real honest. And when he came off the court, because he was probably walking right at you, he came off the court after de-pantsing one of Arizona's guards, and he was yelling at him in the first half. Do you remember that spot?
Yeah, he was fired up. I mean, I think he was embarrassed a bit from out. He hears the criticism. He knows what's going on.
Sure.
And, he had the O for against Alabama and all that. I thought defensively he did. It wasn't just the floaters and the threes. I thought defensively he was terrific in that game as well.
He was.
I got to see him play a decent amount. Homestead came here for a bunch of games. They played Lawrence North here in Indy, and I went to that game, and then they played Carmel in the tournament, and I was at that game. And he had another teammate, Luke Goody, who ended up going on to Illinois.
He's really
And
good.
it just felt like anytime he was open, it was going in. And he was rarely open because he commanded so much attention. But certainly anytime he had even like a little window, the ball was going in. So to see that, to see him kind of struggle with that late in the season and to see that really kind of be inconsistent, it's hard because he has that in him. Like, is he going to be dropping floaters on everybody's head and then knocking down, 22 footers and all that? Probably not, like he did against Arizona. I don't think you can expect that consistently, but you should expect more than 5 points on 1 of 6 shooting from Fletcher Lawyer. Like he's too good for stat lines like that.
Yeah,
He's
the
too
floor shouldn't be that low with him.
Yeah. I agree. And what's neat is that like we're seeing Braden Smith raise his floor, where it's at the point now where you just expect him to produce something, even if he's not producing at like an All-American level, because he's seemingly just gotten that good.
Yeah. So I got a question. I've asked a couple people this question and it's kind of it's kind of random because it's not really fair. If you look at their styles of game, they're very different. But I think a lot of people, first thing I think when you think of a kind of a take charge point guard in this era, a lot of people think of Ohio State's Aaron Craft. Okay. Would you rather have senior Aaron Craft or sophomore Braden Smith right now?
For this Purdue team, I think they need the scoring punch that Smith provides. Aaron Craft played with John Diebler and Evan Turner, and like they had a bunch of guys that could really fill it up on those Ohio State teams. And Purdue, they have good pieces that fit together, but like you can't rely on, you're going to get one a year, like a big game from Mason Gillis or, something like that. So I think it's not a knock on Kraft, who was a really great college basketball player, but I think for this Purdue team, you would rather have Smith. What's interesting, man, is that people, it's so look and even vibes based with these guys. Like the guys that people truly just like JJ Redick, Aaron Kraft, are the guys that they don't look like they should be as good as they are.
Right. Right.
Like you look at, if you cross Braden Smith on the street, you wouldn't think anything of it. Like he just looks like a regular, he looks like a dude. And then he gets there out there on the court and he's dropping 26 and 8 on your head. And you're like, what?
Man,
like
he uses that pick as effectively as anybody I've ever seen. I mean, that's pretty dynamic.
He's a smart player. And he's always kind of been that way. The only concern, and look, I'm not a Matt Pan, I'm not a coach, I'm not a scout or anything like that, but just from watching a lot of basketball, the only really concern that I had about him was physically. I wasn't really worried about anything. Dude can play. There was no question about that. It was about kind of, building up muscle and growing into his body and putting up with the rigor of the Big Ten season, because it's a little bit different than when you're playing, Noblesville. It's not the same level.
I watched a little bit more of your show. Like I was saying, I found that was interesting. You talked about things outside of Purdue, and I wanted to do a little bit of conversation about that, if that's okay with you. To switch gears, especially since I think this show is always Purdue all the time, and I thought it'd be good to have you talking about some things that aren't all Purdue. Let me ask you a question. Switching gears pretty quickly, but I'm looking at the time, and I don't want to eat all your time up. I'm a very casual Pacers fan. I'm generally an anti-NBA guy. I just don't like the style of the game much anymore. But why were they so damn good leading up to that tournament? It was fun to watch them. Number one, I didn't have to deal with Bally's, which was awesome. So I could actually get them on TV. But why were they so good leading up to the championship of that and in the pool play and all that? And why do they look so broken the last few times out on the court?
But I think the simple answer, and this is going to sound like a cop-out, but it's 82 games, and you go through good stretches and bad stretches, and sometimes they even butt up against one another. And I think the Pacers went through kind of a high highs stretch, and now they're going through a low lows one. The defense has always been an issue. They don't, and especially now that you take Nembhard and Jalen Smith out of the lineup, and they don't really have anybody outside of Turner, I guess. But they have nobody that can really defend on the wing, and that's something that's really a missing component of this team. They thought Jarris Walker was going to be that, but he's not quite ready as a rookie, which is fine. Those guys need growth and development and all of that. But I think the in-season tournament, they just kind of they sort of caught lightning in a bottle. They knew that tournament, I don't think players on the Lakers or the Knicks thought about that tournament like, yeah, like this is our chance to get on the big stage. Like they're the Lakers and the Knicks. That tournament was about the Pacers and Pelicans and teams like that playing meaningful basketball in November and December. That's really what it was about.
Yeah.
And I think the Pacers knew that and they embraced that and really kind of went all in and dug in. And that had a lot to do with it. And Tyrese Halliburton playing at a spectacular special level had a lot to do with it as well.
Yeah, I thought so for me, and I don't remember the ABA days. Of course, I think they ended, I was really young. But the style of play that the Pacers played on offense reminded me of the videos I've seen of the ABA. That wide open, lots of movement, tons of fun. Like that to me, that grabbed my attention. I was like, I can watch a whole NBA game now, which I did. I watched multiple NBA games end to end, which I never do anymore. And I think it partially because it's good to see the Pacers win. But even when the Pacers were good back in the last era, which was how long ago now?
Like 12 to 14.
Yeah.
It's different now because, you go back to the 90s. I think we remember like the Reggie Miller threes and things like that. But really, that was like a grind out, punch you in the gut type basketball. Like they were winning. You go back and you watch those Knicks Pacers games. It was more WWE than it was basketball.
Yeah.
And then the 12 to 14 teams were about that too. They were about grinding it out and locking you down defensively, and Hibbert and West and, those big physical presence guys. And now it's just completely and totally different where they can't really defend a lick and they're scoring $130 a night. It's quite a shock to the system for sure.
Yeah, it's wild to see the points at the end of the first quarter, right? They have 40, 50 points. It's like, what the hell is happening?
It was 77-66 at half last night. And you're like, what? Like,
it's weird.
You don't bat it out.
That's exactly what the ABA was. You look at those old scores; they were just it was a different brand of basketball together.
Yeah,
and so
I'm incredible. He was a great, and all those guys, Mel Daniels and Roger Brown, and if there's one, and I said this on the show earlier tonight, if there's one good thing that kind of comes with, it's always sad to see people pass on, but at least George was here to get his recognition, and Slick, to get the recognition, Mel Daniels too, to get the recognition that they so richly deserved as Hall of Famers, because that's what they were. I don't care that it's not the NBA. I mean, they were unbelievable. George McGinnis went to the NBA and tore it up. So like, he didn't need to validate his career to anybody else.
That's real special that they got. I was in a comment section the other day, and every now and again, I shouldn't even do it. I don't know why any of us ever leave comments on any post on Instagram.
Right?
Especially, I'm like, I should learn my lesson, but somebody talked about the Pacers never having championships, and I'm like, I hate that. I understand why anybody in the NBA would see that the Pacers, that ABA championships don't matter, but those teams were pretty damn good, and that was a pretty fun era of basketball. I heard you say the atmosphere at the Purdue Arizona game was excellent, and one of the things that surprised you was the Arizona fans.
Yeah.
Were there, because it looked like, I was trying to figure out, were those Ball State fans in red, or was that legit Arizona people down low?
We were behind the broadcasters, so on the opposite side of the PA and people on the opposite side of the court, and there was one section diagonal from us that was Arizona. Like, look, it was like an 80-20 Purdue crowd, obviously, and there were some Ball State fans. There were even it looked like a guy and his wife that both had IU hoodies on, and they were sitting right in the Arizona section. I mean, do whatever you want, I guess. It's a nice Saturday afternoon to watch basketball, but it was a little weird. I also saw a guy in a purple Northwestern hoodie, and I'm like, is that intentional, or are you just randomly wearing that because it's cold? Yeah. But no, there was a good, I mean, they jumped out to, what was it, like a 17-11, 19-11, something like that lead, and they started doing a U of A, and it was loud. I mean, I was near the court, so maybe it was because we were near.
It sounded loud on TV when they were doing that.
Okay, so you heard it too on TV. Yeah, I thought it was. And we talked to some of them. Me and my colleague Trevor Peters were running a booth beforehand on the concourse, and talked to some of them like, "Hey, are you from there or whatever else?" And many of them were just saying that they were, in Indiana now, but they had family there. Or we talked to one guy who was an alum who lives in Fishers. But there were people that traveled in for the game. And it's a great, it's like what Arizona in basketball to me is what Colorado is in football. where it's just there's something cool about it. Like, I don't know, like I remember I barely remember the Sean Elliott Arizona teams, but I remember like Khalid Reeves and Damon Stoudemire and like those groups into the Richard Jefferson, Jason Gardner, the teams that went to
Jason Gardner. I always think of him because that was such a big deal, him getting out of the state of Indiana, right?
Yeah, from right here in North Central in Indianapolis. So I think it's a program to me that's always had a lot of like kind of a cool factor to it.
Cachet, right?
Yeah, and they were all friendly. At least the ones that I talked to, they knew we were pulling for Purdue, but they were cool about it.
When they won their national title, that was through Indy, right? Wasn't that the last national championship?
97. Miles Simon and Arizona are the only national champion to beat all they wouldn't have beaten all four, but to beat 3-1 seeds.
Whoa.
To win the championship. You might want to look that up to verify, but I thought that I remembered hearing that they're the only team to beat 3-1 seeds. Yeah.
Yeah. That was a special team.
Because that's the most that you can play, right? So they would
right.
Maybe somebody else has done it, but 97 Arizona did it.
Yeah, they had cool factor though, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Maybe more than any national championship. You think about all the teams that were like, UNLV was cool, but it was different. They were hated by a lot of people. I don't know if Arizona was hated right then.
No, I don't think so. I was rooting for them real hard because I didn't want to see Kentucky win. I was sick of Kentucky.
Right. Nobody. We can meet on that stage right there. I was at the game where Wisconsin beat Kentucky, the undefeated Kentucky team in ND too.
I was there too. Yeah, what an atmosphere.
That was fun. Hearing them walk out quietly was great.
Yeah. Because I think most UK fans thought that was a coronation. Like they had no inkling that they could possibly lose that game, and then they did, and that Wisconsin team was stacked, man. Kaminsky, and Decker,
but Kentucky was more stacked that year, right? Is that the year they had 6?
Oh yeah. What, Cauley Stein, Karl Anthony Towns, both of them
on that team,
twins. Yeah, they were loaded up. Like Devin Booker was like the 7th best player on that
team.
Right.
That's right. That's ridiculous. Yeah. So stupid. Yeah. Well, I appreciate your time tonight. Thanks a lot for just checking back in. I always like talking to you, and appreciate your insight. It's a little different than what our listeners, our viewers get to see all the time. So we'll have to do it again sometime. Thanks a lot, buddy.
Boiler up.
Hammer down.
Thanks for tuning in to the Boiled Sports Podcast Network.